committed to delivering information that's important to you and your community.
Hello again. Welcome to Life Esteem. Always glad to have you as a viewer to this program. And today we're going to talk about the census of 2020. We have with us Sharon Freeman and also Jeff Connelly. Thank you both for being here to talk about this very important effort that takes place, what, once every 10 years? Is that what it is?
Yes,
okay.
Once every 10 years.
Can you believe it? Man, here we are again, Census 2020. But also I know that you're hoping to recruit and get more people involved in the whole process of taking the census. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a very important part of the census. If people would just fill out their forms, then we wouldn't need to, but unfortunately not everybody understands the importance of the census, so therefore some people don't know to look for the form and they just throw it out, and other people just don't. They just don't fill it out. So we are recruiting in Dauphin County 2,300 people to go out and knock on those doors with those friendly faces and those big smiles and encourage people to fill out the census because it's vitally important to what goes on in their community.
And Jeff, one of the things I know you do is you partner with various groups, and so talk about that, what you do in order to make that happen.
So I'm what you call a partnership specialist, and I'm assigned to the Dauphin County, Harrisburg area. And my job is to primarily meet with the different organizations to help prepare them in their outreach campaign for the 2020 census. So I'm meeting with local governments, working with nonprofit organizations, faith-based organizations, businesses, school districts, and just about anybody else that might have some equities in the results of the 2020 census. So I spend most of my time presenting to them. I work with them in developing outreach strategies so that they can reach their population and educate and motivate them to respond to the survey. And then I also emphasize the importance that it's safe and it's easy and it's important to do the census in 2020.
Fantastic. Good stuff.
Well, it's interesting you make comment about that, Jeff, because when I know you presented to Systems of Care about a month or so ago, and you talked about how important the census is. Tell folks what that means in regard to what that means financially and funding and things.
Oh, absolutely. So, first of all, the census has been around since 1790. It's written into our Constitution. So, it's written in Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, and there's three important outcomes of the census, and that is that the first is that it determines the reapportionment of our seats in Congress and the House of Representatives. Right now we have 435 seats to be distributed throughout the United States. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania currently has 18. Governor Wolf believes that, if we don't get a good complete count in 2020, we could possibly lose one or more of those seats. So it's very important in the sense that we have representation in Congress, and the census determines how many representatives we have. Second is that it also determines the redrawing of the legislative lines at the federal, state, and local level. So you'll see in April 2021, after the results have been published for the 2020 census, that there'll be the process of Pennsylvania going through and redrawing those lines. But thirdly, and most importantly, is that the results of the census determined the distribution of over $675 billion in federal program money to all of the states, Pennsylvania of which collects about $27 to $30 billion a year. And this is pretty significant. These are programs like Medicaid, Medicare, SNAP, WIC, education grants, infrastructure projects, rural programs, you name it. I mean, anything that has a federal dollar connected to it, it has some linkage to the decennial census. So this is very important to our community.
And Sharon, I know that, trying to get people to sign up to become recruiters, or what do you call them? They're called what?
They're called census takers or enumerators.
Okay. And so what's the difficulty? People just don't see themselves wanting to get out there, knock on the door, they're apprehensive, or, what
There are a few things that I've started asking people when they say they're not interested, why they're not interested. I'm getting a interesting mix of responses. Some people, just because the climate of our society, where we're not that civil and nice anymore, people are apprehensive to go into people's doors, and they don't want anybody to come out and then begin to be aggressive against them because they're connected with the government. There's also a very, very high unemployment rate right now, which is great, but then a lot of people who are now not looking for jobs and not willing to take a second job. So it's a number of factors, but it's vitally important that we get these numbers. The African American community and the Hispanic communities are generally underreported. And so we really need people from those communities, because the idea of the census is to do the census in the community where you live,
Right.
so that it's people who look like you who are taking the census. Therefore, you might be a little bit more inclined to want to give the information if it's somebody from your community. So it's vitally important. We are really struggling right now to fill our numbers. And especially in the Afro-American community and the Hispanic community. It's really vitally important that we get out. You know, this and voting are probably the two most important things that we'll do as citizens. And this one's only once every 10 years, so people really don't think about it. We have voting, you know, several times. You know, we have local elections, and then we have the national election, so people are more informed about the need to vote. The census is something, when you say census, they give you this blank stare, like, you know, and so because of that, you know, there's less information about the census.
So what are the age, I mean, you know, do you have to be 21?
Right now, you have to be 18, but if you are 17 and going to be 18 in the near future, they will hold your application so you can apply at 17. They've made a lot of different concessions in order to get people. Right now, you do not have to be a U.S. citizen. They have changed that requirement so that we can get non-U.S. citizens and people who speak foreign languages. We have a lot of different language groups in Dauphin County, and we need people who speak foreign languages. A lot of those people may not be citizens, or their English may not be that good. So now we've developed a program where we're using interpreters. So they will go out with a English-speaking person and go to the homes of people who speak their native language.
So
And one more thing, and also we are now in the number of the social service income programs where you have a limited amount of money that you can make to stay in the program. The census pay is going to be exempted. So you can get a waiver and still be able to stay under your income requirement.
Fantastic.
Well, you said something, and then Jeff talked about this as well, in regard to undocumented citizens or individual communities, that they shouldn't be alarmed or alert or feel as though that information may get back to other channels. Now, talk about that. I remember you saying something like this.
Yes, so as I mentioned before, our tagline for educating and motivating the population is that it's safe, it's easy, and it's important. It's safe because the information we collect on individuals throughout our communities is safeguarded by two federal laws, Title 13 of the United States Code and Title 44 of the United States Code. Title 13 protects individuals' information from being garnered from by any other federal agency, to include the executive and judicial branches. So the information that we gather from anybody that responds to the survey cannot be pulled from our system and used for other purposes. We simply use it for data analytics so that they can make good policy decisions and have policy debates. Title 44 prevents the same information from being released about any individuals for 72 years. So if you wanted to, for example, to do a genealogy study of your family background, the only information you can get right now from the Census Bureau is stored at the National Archives for information from the 1940 census and back. So the information is very safe, and we try to make sure that as we educate and motivate people through the complete count committees, which we'll talk about, and other organizations, we want to emphasize to them that the information that we gather from is going to be in good hands. We also have a state-of-the-art cybersecurity system. One of the things I mentioned is that it's going to be easier than it has been in the past. This is going to be the first census where we actually collect information online, which allows people at the convenience of their hands, through their smart devices, their iPads, their computers at home, or the computers in the community centers like libraries and other places. They can go online for 10 to 15 minutes and knock out their survey, and depending on the size of their household and the occupants and everything like that, and be done with it right away. So we have a very robust cybersecurity system, and we use a special thing called differential privacy, which basically makes the information undiscernible for anybody that might acquire the information through unconventional means. And then the last part of it is it's important, and that's the part that we talked about earlier as far as what the outcomes are related to reapportionment of representation in Congress and then the $675 billion worth of federal funding.
And in addition to that, every census worker has to take an oath. And if we violate that and somehow divulge anyone's personal identifiable information, we can be fined up to $250,000 and spend 5 years in jail.
Wow.
I'm not trying to go to jail, nor is anyone else in the census. So therefore, the penalty is very steep on the actual workers as well, because this is important information, and we do not want this to get out to anyone except the Census Bureau itself.
Absolutely.
And that is a lifetime oath, by the way.
Yes,
It doesn't
we're sworn
expire.
for life.
For life.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd be able to.
So it's extremely confidential, right?
Yes.
It's protected and it's necessary. And
Yes.
so we just got to get
Absolutely.
folks out there who will knock on those doors, collect the information as much as possible. Because I remember how it affected Harrisburg, city of Harrisburg once. I remember our numbers were up, but I forget what the numbers were. But then all of a sudden there was this big dispute about actual numbers, and we were down to like 49,000 something.
Yes.
And that made a tremendous difference in terms of the funding, right? That
You're
were coming
absolutely
to
right.
the city.
The magic number is 50,000 for a couple different federal programs, and as you've stated accurately, Harrisburg is officially documented at around 49,750, somewhere around there. So they just fell underneath a tier of funding in that in a number of different programs. Harrisburg historically has not had a good participation rate. For the last two census, I think the outcome was 65% participation. And it's because Harrisburg is such a very diverse community, and that's a great thing, but because of the diversity and because of the fact there's a concentration of hard-to-count populations, you're talking a very dynamic effort in the outreach to try to get people to be more trustworthy of the survey.
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about hard-to-count populations, we're talking about people of color, of which the Latino population is the largest segment of that category, children under 5, renters, people that are living in, under the poverty level, transient people, homeless people, the LGBT community, and a number of other segments of our population that have traditionally shown not to respond. So when we talk about our outreach campaign, and I mentioned complete count committees, what we're trying to do is recruit trusted voices in each of those communities that are considered leaders that can better understand the census and the fact that it's safe, it's easy, and important, and then carry that message as a trusted voice to their respective communities so that we ultimately get a better turnout. And we're working closely with Mayor Pappenfuse, the City Council, the Dauphin County Commissioners to make sure that our complete count committees include those trusted voices as members of the committees.
Good stuff.
Well, let me ask a question, Jeff. When you say Harrisburg, are you talking about Harrisburg proper or Harrisburg in general? Because, we have all our townships and boroughs and all these other aspects. And we might have a Harrisburg address, but we're not Harrisburg as far as,
Yes,
community.
yes.
So when you say Harrisburg, what does that mean?
So from a census standpoint, we're talking about Harrisburg proper.
Okay.
So we
All right.
do have, we do try to define the statistical differences from one locality to another by way of what we call census tracts. Now, they're not perfectly aligned with the city boundary or the municipality boundaries, but when we talk about the statistics of Harrisburg versus Lower Paxton Township versus Steelton, we try to basically establish the statistical analysis based off of the tracts that cover most of that jurisdiction. So yes, there's, for example, we're dealing with both Dauphin County Complete Count Committee and the Harrisburg City Complete Count Committee. When we talk to those two different audiences, we try to help tailor our statistics specifically to their unique challenge. Because Dauphin County is dealing with obviously quite a larger geographic region, and they have a more diverse and complex challenge because they're dealing not only with the dynamics of Harrisburg City, but they're also dealing with a very large rural community to the north. So from their perspective, we try to tailor our statistical analysis to the dynamic that they deal with in their demographic. And so, yes, when you talk about like Harrisburg City and past participation rates, the breakdown of the percentages of their hard-to-count communities, we try to make that very specific because their outreach campaign has to be tailored to those specifics as well.
You know, Sharon, I remember working with the United Way of the Capital Region and working in the education area in particular. And one of the things we discovered is that how many students moved from one district to the next or one school building to the next. They were constantly moving.
Yeah.
In the course of a school year, they may move 3 and 4 times, some families, you know. So I'd imagine it'd be very difficult, right, to get a count on people who are constantly, you know, just going all over the place. Yeah.
Well, one of the things, I'll go and then you can go. One of the things that the census does is it has the ability to weed out double counts or so, especially with college students. We go to the colleges, we have what we call group quarters. We go into institutions, we go into colleges, nursing homes, prisons, anywhere where people are housed in groups. And we count people there. That's like an early count before the actual census, which Census Day is April 1st, 2020. But when we go into colleges, it's basically where you've been living more than 50% of the time. So college students may be counted at their college, and then their parents, when they fill out their form, may count them again. But the logarithm system has a way to determine where those people actually should be counted and then remove them from the one place and put them in the other.
Fantastic.
And I will add to that in that it's very much part of the education process when we talk about, you know, making sure that the institutions themselves know how these folks are counted. The college campuses, for example, like Harrisburg University, you know, we have foreign-born students that are attending full-time college there. Well, you know, a lot of people don't realize that our foreign-born students count for Harrisburg's total count because it's, you know, counting them once, only once, and in the right place. And based off of Census Bureau rules, if you spend the preponderance of your time in Harrisburg City, then you should by all means be counted as part of Harrisburg's population. So there's, you know, it's a very interesting dynamic, and we've had some challenges in the past where because the rules for the count were not clearly understood by local municipalities, they've often missed opportunities to garner additional count within their total population count.
Wow.
And one of the reasons for that is simply because you will be using the resources of where you are. You know, so the money for you needs to come into where you will be using those resources. So that's the reason that they count you where you live most of the time, because that's where you're using those resources.
Well, let me ask this, okay? Getting back to Nate's earlier, you know, mentioning about students moving back and forth, different school districts. Plus, some of the people that move out of state to state. And at what point, let's say, the census is for that year, right, starting April 1st, as you said. So if you get to me in June, all right, and I give you a census, then I move to Maryland in September, would you discount me, or how would that work? I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Would you like me to answer that? So, so for people that are transient, you know, basically the general rule is wherever you are on census day is where you should be counted. Now, in that particular example where you were counted in Pennsylvania in June and then you moved to Maryland, your count would basically end up in Pennsylvania most likely, because I'm assuming that up until that time you were living or working in Pennsylvania in some capacity. But our questions and our database have a way to kind of deconflict and make those decisions on the fly as a best way to kind of figure that out. Because like one example is like, say that a family lives in Ohio and their son gets a free scholarship ride to Penn State Harrisburg, and he's attending in Penn State Harrisburg, but they both answer the survey at each of their respective locations for that son or that, you know, young man going to college. Well, the system will take that, and there's a question that basically has is like a clarifying question on the census. You know, like they'll say, okay, this son lives with us in Columbus, Ohio. Do they go to school anywhere else? And that question will be answered. And then when his survey and their survey come together, the system will say, well, he belongs to Penn State Harrisburg, and we're going to count him there. So, so there's some things that go on in the database. And if the information is not clearly understood through those analytics within the system, what it'll do is it'll prompt a non-response follow-up, which means that we will send one of our enumerators when we get to like a certain time of the year to go to the individual where they they supposedly live, and ask them clarifying questions so we can get the right count at the right place.
Makes sense. Okay.
So we're trying to recruit today also us workers, and I know there's some people out there who certainly could do the work and need to work, right? So what is the process? So I'm interested. I'm sitting here watching this program, and all of a sudden I'm saying, hey, maybe I could be a recruiter. But what is the process? What do I need to do?
Okay.
Hey, by the way, if I have a record, is that going to stop me from being a
Not
recruiter?
necessarily.
Okay.
There is, and we're not privy to this, but in the system they have things that they look for, and they haven't told us what they are, but we encourage everyone to apply. It only takes about 30, 40 minutes, so you don't have to go anywhere.
Okay.
You apply online. It's 2020 Census at census.gov/jobs, JOBS.
Okay.
And the entire process is done online. You need an email address because the census will correspond to you through your email. So when they need more information from you, they'll send you an email. You get the information back to them through the email process, and then it goes on. The current pay for enumerators for Dauphin County is $15.50 an hour.
Okay.
I was told, but we'll wait and see, that salary is going to be increased. Again, we're doing everything we can to make this attractive to people so that they will apply.
And how many hours are they expected to put in?
Generally, the more the better,
Okay.
but you can work part-time with this, you can work full-time, and the nice thing about it is that you can set your own hours. So if you have children in school and you need to work when they're in school, you can work in the evenings and weekends, or if you need to work in the mornings, or whatever your schedule is, you can tailor your census employment around what your schedule is. So we've made it convenient, it's flexible, it's a good pay. You get paid weekly on Wednesday, which is one of my favorite things about it. Because I'll have my money before Friday.
There you go. That's excellent.
And but the process does take some time.
Yeah.
It's probably a 30 to 40 day process from the time that you start. Now that depends a lot on how fast you get the information back. So if you don't check your emails on a regular basis and a week goes by before you see that the census has contacted you, and another 4 days goes by before you get the information back, yours is going to take longer. After all of that's done, you will receive a phone call from the office, and they will offer you a job. And the nice thing about that is if you for some reason or another can't take the job, you can turn that job down, your name will go back in the pool, and you can be called again. Not too many jobs where you can turn them down and they'll continue to call you. I got called 8 times for a clerk job before I got the job as a recruiting assistant, because I didn't want a clerk job, I wanted this job. I kept turning it down, and they kept calling me, and then finally they called me for this, and I said yes. So that's a nice benefit of it. After you get a call, you get another email saying that you should make an appointment to get fingerprints. Fingerprints are paid for by the federal government. You go, you make your appointment, you go, you get your fingerprints taken. Then you get another email for background information for the federal FBI check. Okay, they do that. So when you send that information back, then they do the FBI check. After that, you'll get another phone call, and it'll set you up for training. You must attend all the training. Again, if you can't attend that training, you can say, I can't make those dates. Every time they call me, it's like when I'm just getting ready to go on vacation. But then they'll put your name back in, and you can possibly get another call. So it's a long process, but it's a process that if you cannot do it when they call you, they will call you back. And seeing as how we need people, it behooves you to just apply. Whether you think you can do it when the time comes or not, because who knows what tomorrow holds. Maybe you have a job now, and maybe next February, March, April, you don't have a job, but at least you're in the pool for applicants to work for the census. Most people will work through the summer, July, August, when we start wrapping up. And then, so depending on when you work, if you get hired in February or March, you can work 6-7 months, making $15.50 an hour or more, hopefully. And you can work, like I said, when you can.
Are you
Well, it's
expected to
interesting.
go out by yourself when you're out there doing the thing, or because you set your own schedule, right? So you're
Yes.
kind of just going out. Okay.
You are going out by yourself.
Okay.
You don't enter anybody's home.
Okay.
And any place you don't feel safe, you don't go.
Just don't
You
go.
just, no, we're not trying to have anybody be injured or anything like that. I think I did enumerating last year, and there were some apartment buildings that I went to, and they had no lights, on.
Oh, no.
I didn't go in there,
Yeah.
And what they do is they'll probably send that back, and they might send 2 people, or something like that. They'll make
Yes.
some adjustments for that. But we want everybody to feel safe about the job that they're doing. So, and if you're an interpreter, you will go out with another person. Those are the only thing, but most people go out by themselves.
Well, you said something interesting because the last census, I believe it was the last census, you said with people had to fill out, an application, but I remember doing that, and I had to go into and take a test.
Yes.
Yeah.
This year, the census is entirely online.
Okay.
There's no applications. I mean, there's applications. There's no resumes. There's no testing. There's
Okay.
no interview per se. So we are pretty much hiring people sight unseen, and just by the information on their applications and the way they answer the questions.
Yeah. Yeah, that I remember. Now you said something. I remember.
Yeah.
I remember taking a test.
I took a test too.
That's good.
Just getting back to the question of like the safety of the
Yeah.
enumerators. One of the other things that we do through the Field Operations Division is we also coordinate with the local law enforcement. So when it's time for us to put people on the streets, we send messages out through the law enforcement community and the public safety community of when they're coming, what they should look like, what types of identifying features they have.
Okay.
We even have a website where citizens or the population can check on the employee by looking for the key information that they're supposed to provide on their identification. So there is a system in place to make sure that our employees are safeguarded.
I was going to ask that. I'm so glad you said that. So they actually have an identification, a badge or
Yeah,
something
we have
that
badges.
identifies. That's
Yes,
great.
we have badges with our
Excellent.
pictures on them.
Okay.
okay.
Wonderful.
And a lot of the local municipalities and boroughs are also aware that we're coming, and so when people call in, I know Paxtang has a very, very tight system. Their residents don't let anybody on the street unless they've been told that these people are coming, and so a lot of the boroughs will be notifying their constituents living there that the census is out.
Okay.
So-
All right. Okay, that's good
So
stuff.
just so I understand, this is going to start in April. Is that right? Or
you're looking for people
the whole
now.
process. You're looking for
Yes,
people now,
yes.
but this process starts in April.
Right, we have an
Okay,
early,
good.
the group quarters is going to start in March.
So we're down to this 1 minute. So how can people contact you? One more time, how can they get involved if they want to be a recruiter or a census taker?
All right, it's 2020 census, census.gov/jobs.
Okay.
And I might say from the partnership side, if you want to get involved in helping your community and getting a complete count, please go to www.2020census.gov/partners. There's a wealth of information there. There's a lot of fact sheets, a lot of information that can help everybody to get a complete count. And if you're in the local area and you're a trusted voice, join a complete count committee.
Thank you both so much. I'm sorry we ran out of time because this is
Yes,
fascinating, great
interesting,
information. Please get involved in the census. It's so important to your community and to you. We'll see you next time here on Life Esteem. Great job.
Thank you.